You almost can't make this stuff up at this point because the Chicago Bulls have yet again gone out and signed another Illinois product. Not a Chicago native, but still an Illinois player nonetheless out of Belleville, that being EJ Liddell, who, like Taylor Horton Jr. and Kenny Lofton Jr. will also be getting training camp invites and a shot at making the team. And it's starting to become more and more clear that the Bulls maybe, just maybe, are gearing up for a trade of some kind or other roster adjustments and perhaps putting some of these contingencies in place to add to their final roster. That said, I still think it's very unlikely that any of the three recent additions in Liddell, Taylor Horton Tucker, and Kenny Lofton Jr. will be making it beyond training camp or preseason play. But regardless, I've had a lot of people ask, who is EJ Liddell and what can he bring to the Bulls? Well, let's talk about it in this video. So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Now, EJ Liddell, a lot of Bulls fans probably remember because going into the 2022 draft and assessing players that might fall to the Bulls and where they were selecting 18th overall, EJ Liddell was one of those guys you often saw on a lot of mock boards going to the Bulls. And I myself had Liddell as one of my top players I wanted to see the Bulls take with that 18th pick in 2022. I'll admit, I knew very little of Dalen Terry when the Bulls ultimately drafted him and was surprised they picked him with a lot of other guys on the board like Walker Kessler, Nikola, and yes, even EJ Liddell. Liddell was one of those players that I thought would make for a good fit on the roster at the time, and even to this day, to be honest, at the time the Bulls needed more front court players, and they still do. And EJ Liddell is a 6'7" power forward with a long wingspan, a great rebounder, and a good scorer in college. He did come into the draft a little older, having been a 3-year college player at Ohio State, and sometimes teams are a little wary of taking on an older player who may not have as much upside, but regardless, I was still surprised to see Liddell fall as low as he did, going into the second round and being taken 41st overall by the Pelicans. Liddell was a top 50 recruit coming out of high school, a 2-time Illinois Mr. Basketball player, was ranked the best player in the state of Illinois in his senior season. In college, he came off the bench most of his freshman year, but would really blossom in his sophomore year season, taking the reins and being selected Big Ten All-Second Team, and following that up in his junior year being selected to All Big Ten First Team as well as the Big Ten All-Defensive Team and Third Team All-American. And so in my view, for the Pelicans to land this guy that late in the draft was a steal. But unfortunately for Liddell, he would tear his ACL in Summer League and would miss his whole rookie season. And while Liddell would play the following year, last season to be exact, he would ultimately only end up playing in 8 games total, most of which were in garbage time. And it was clear that Liddell really didn't look like the same player coming out of college. And also for the Pelicans, a team looking to win now, there wasn't going to be as much opportunity for him. Liddell, of course, this offseason was included in that trade deal that sent DeJounte Murray to the Pelicans, and then he was again traded just a few weeks later to the Suns before the Suns a few weeks after that would waive him. Now, as far as the Bulls signing EJ Liddell, I mean, very similar to the Lofton and THT signings, I don't think it's going to matter in the grand scheme of things. Like, even if any of these guys actually make the team for that 15th roster spot, if the Bulls do in fact waive Batum, you're talking about the 15th man on the team. They're not going to have an impact on this group, both for the immediate and long term. What I will say, though, is I like the signing in the fact that it's a player that fits a position of need and a young player that could have some upside if given the right opportunity. A player that maybe hasn't been able to truly showcase what he can do post his ACL injury, a guy that can actually crash the boards but also shoot threes at a decent clip and play moderate defense. It's a low-risk flyer where if he looks ready to go and shines in training camp, you can get him on a cheap minimum deal. The Bulls are definitely going after a type, though. I mean, aside from all of the Illinois natives, it's these younger players who have some experience under their belts, whether it was a longer college career or some NBA experience, and guys who are also big shots, big names that were coming out of high school. Going back to what I was saying earlier, though, in the Bulls gearing up for a trade, I mean, it's probably unlikely, but in the event the Bulls are actually making traction on some potential trades for Vuce or Lavine, and the guys they're getting in return are more for salary dump purposes where they would just waive and stretch their deal, that would leave the Bulls some empty roster spots that they're going to need to fill, which maybe these guys would then take. And it would fit the idea of taking a step back this season and trying to keep that draft pick when you replace Vucevic and Lavine with guys like Lofton and EJ Liddell, and could also potentially be guys that you could still work with for the future. That said, highly unlikely because it would mean the Bulls would have to make these trades before the start of the season, as they currently are at a 15-man roster with just one two-way contract available. they wouldn't be able to just hang on to all these guys throughout the season until the trade deadline. But anyway, tinfoil hat theory for why the Bulls are signing all of these guys to training camp invites. Anyway, let me know what you guys thought of the Bulls signing EJ Liddell. Let me know in the comments. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.